Well, Dr. Earl, thank you for joining us today, and thank you for being part of Activz. We're excited to have you part of the team.
It's great to be here.
I think I speak for everyone when I ask, tell us a little bit about your history in medicine.
Well, I started out at a very young age wanting to practice medicine and fell in love with medicine with an old-time family practice doctor in town, and he just really cared about patients, really cared about the people. And because of that, I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a doctor. Well, sure enough, went through medical school and got out and had the wonderful opportunity to practice emergency medicine. And while I was there, I practiced for 16 years. I got to fly on Life Flight. I got to run with the SWAT team. And I did some pretty incredible things. But ultimately, it came down to a choice of how to make the biggest impact. And I went into medicine to really help and to look at getting people well. And what I found was what was happening was we were just moving them from one prescription to the next or to surgery. The answer is drug it or cut it. And that just really didn't fly after a certain period of time. And then add to that the fact that we started having chronic pain issues, patients who just wouldn't get better no matter what. And it really became quite difficult to feel practicing that type of medicine was rewarding. Then ultimately, I guess, ultimate kick in the pants, if you will, I ended up getting very sick myself. And after seeing multiple doctors, cardiologists, pulmonologists, infectious disease doctors, and so forth, all who had no answers, I had to turn to functional medicine and, if you will, a more natural approach in order to find and discover my illness and ultimately help get myself well.
Well, after all those years of practice, and you've probably seen thousands, maybe tens of thousands of patients, do they fit into some common areas of the types of patients and the types of problems that they come to see you for?
Very much so. You find that patients really tend to, if you pay attention to the way that patients come in, they have certain complaints and they have certain systems. The biggest thing as well that I noticed with Western medicine, if you will, is that they try to compartmentalize patients too much. And we find that the systems are so linked, they're so connected together, that if we don't address the entire system, if we don't address the cross connections between different systems, we're missing the curative process.
Well, it's funny you should use the word LINQ. I know I didn't coach you for that. But in regards to the product that we're introducing called LINQ, we're pretty excited about this connection between different systems. And can you tell us a little bit about the connectivity between the brain and the gut, or what some people call the second brain?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing to keep in mind is there are numerous, too numerous to count, authorities, experts in functional medicine, foundational medicine, in medicine that actually cures, that that have noted that the gut is the key to health. And the reason is because, first, it's responsible for digesting our nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, all those key components that we need in order for us to maintain health. The second is that it is very integrated with our immune system. Estimates, and I shouldn't say estimates, depending upon your degree of illness, if you will, and inflammation, 70 to 80% of your immune system actually resides in and around the digestive system. So huge. And ultimately, the other component is the nerves. There's actually enough nerve tissue around the gut, around the digestive system, that they call it a second brain. And interestingly enough, 90 to 95% of neurotransmitters are actually made in and around the digestive system, even that your brain uses.
Well, we hear a lot about gut health and the importance of gut health. There's things that are prebiotics, probiotics. There's a lot of noise out there about what people should be doing for their gut health and to reestablish or strengthen this connection between the brain and the second brain, or the gut, and sometimes called the microbiome. What do you think is the crucial difference with our product called LINQ and other things that are out there?
Well, we often talk about Western medicine and the fact that it's often treating the leaves on the tree and not the true root cause. We know through basic gardening, or if you've done anything with plants, that if you'll get something into the root system, if you'll actually introduce it into the soil and let the roots take it up, you affect the entire organism. And that's what we really find with LINQ. is the fact that it really gets deep into the body, into the system. It's a crucial link, actually, between your microbiome, the bacteria that live in your gut, your digestive system, and then ultimately your nervous system. It's connected in so many different ways, and it really is foundational to true health.
As I've researched our active ingredients, butyric acid and other very important ingredients that are part of LINQ, I've been overwhelmed by the amount of research and the number of benefits that supplementing with this very unique proprietary active ingredient can have. But if you were to talk about, the top 3 or 4 benefits that people could expect, you're the doctor, what would you say are the top benefits?
Well, I think keep in mind some very important things. We're tying inflammation to so many different diseases, be that cardiovascular disease, hypertension, strokes. The list goes on and on and on. So LINQ has a crucial role to play in decreasing overall systemic inflammation. The other thing is, we've talked about foundational things. Let me back up just a little bit here, if I may, and say, as a doctor, if I can find a product or a system or a series of products that really affects the body and the tissues so foundationally that it makes such a big difference throughout the entire system, I get excited about that. I really do. And so that's what we find with LINQ. Everything from altering your DNA and the way that it is expressed, improving your inflammation. Understand, inflammation is a normal part of your body's system. It's just when it gets out of balance and out of sorts that it becomes a problem. Well, butyric acid helps with that. Again, we've talked about DNA. The other key component, mitochondria. These are the powerhouses of your body. They're what energize your cells and ultimately you. And so butyric acid has an amazing effect on upregulating mitochondria and then making sure that they work correctly in regards to utilizing glucose and oxygen. So it's a very profound effect that it has on the entire system.
So going off that for a second, in terms of the mitochondria, does that affect metabolism and such things as weight loss, energy levels, all of those things?
Yeah, they did a study that actually revealed that patients who did nothing more than just take butyric acid had better utilization of their glucose, their mitochondria increased, they lost on an average of 10% of their body weight, and overall improved their energy and sense of well-being significantly.
Now, I've heard you say that endothelial cells love to eat butyrate. Now, I'm not sure if that's exactly the right way it works, but first of all, can you tell us what in the world are endothelial cells and why they're so important?
Endothelial cells are, we've discarded them with Western medicine forever, but the reality is we're realizing how critical they are. They are the cells that line our digestive system. So they are what is responsible for us to absorb the nutrients, the energy, the vitamins, the minerals that we need. They're responsible for that. They're also responsible for keeping what's called a tight junction, a connection in between those areas. They create a barrier. They're our first line of defense. And you may have heard of something called leaky gut, and that's where that defense becomes broken down. Well, the endothelial cells, their their preferred energy source is butyric acid. It's a short-chain fatty acid that is typically made by our microbiome, by the bacteria, the healthy bacteria. It's one of their byproducts. How efficient that our body then uses that as its primary energy source. And so all of these different connections come together with the butyric acid.
Well, I guess that if our body makes it already, the reason that it would be important to supplement it with a product like LINQ that has been shown to be the most bioavailable form of butyric acid must be that we're not making enough of it. Maybe our diet, maybe our lifestyle. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, interesting. Two of the major components where we used to get a lot of our butyric acid from, if you will, from our diet was unpasteurized milk and unpasteurized butter or ghee. And that just doesn't exist anymore. It's a staple of other cultures, but here in the United States, we pasteurize our milk and that destroys it. That breaks it down. The other big component is fiber. So if we would get enough fiber, the microbiome would make the butyric acid, and we would be able to have sufficient, if you will, for what we needed. But the reality is we get out of balance. So now the bad bacteria have an upper edge, if you will, on the good bacteria. So they're not functioning at optimal levels. And what happens is they end up not making the butyric acid that we need.
Doctor, going back to the endothelial cells and the stomach lining, you said that the stomach lining is important to keep the good stuff in and absorb, helping the absorption of nutrients, and keep the bad stuff out, pathogens, toxins, things like that. I've also read that the same thing is true of what's called the blood-brain barrier. Can you tell us what that is, and what is the role of butyric acid in regards to strengthening that?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes. That's the simple answer. But the connection is the same proteins that bind together those endothelial cells in the digestive system, in your intestines and the lining there, actually are responsible for helping form the blood-brain barrier as well. The blood-brain barrier is responsible for protecting our brains and not allowing the proteins, the mRNA, the rRNA, those different signal molecules that happen in between the rest of our cells from corrupting the signal that goes on inside of our brain. And so our brain is able to filter out, if you will, the things that it wants to receive and not necessarily see the things that it doesn't want to receive. And so that's a crucial element. And we often have patients who come in with brain fog, can't think clearly, a lot of different things, and we can tie that back to a leaky blood-brain barrier and the amount of information and confusion that that brain is experiencing.
So strengthening that blood-brain barrier seems like that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do.
You mentioned earlier about the role of the gut in creating neurotransmitters. What exactly are neurotransmitters, and why is it so important?
Neurotransmitters. So let me back up again just a little bit, if you will. And the nerves inside of our bodies, they don't actually connect directly. So it's not a direct transmission of energy from one nerve to the next. What happens is there's a small gap, and there's multiple small gaps in between these nerve connections. They're called synapses. And the way that we get energy from nerve A, if you will, to nerve B is there is a chemical connection that goes across. That can be GABA, dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, norepinephrine. Those are your neurotransmitters. And so depending upon the signal that is sent, a combination of neurotransmitters can be sent across, and then that relays the information to this nerve, and it can be carried downstream a little bit. And this connection happens very, very quickly. We know how quickly a signal can get from your brain to your foot and when you step on it, or when you want to move, or from your foot to your brain when you step on a nail.
So you mentioned some neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin. Typically, we think of those as being very important for mood, for our ability to sleep, and do things like that. Are you telling me that that actually starts in the gut, and that if we take care of our gut and increase the health of the microbiome, we're affecting our brain health, our mood, and other problems like that?
Yes, and the answer to that is absolutely. Not just yes, absolutely. It's a critical component, and it's a critical link that has been made by science in just the last little bit. And it's drawing that connection and making that connection complete and whole that really empowers overall health.
So you mentioned brain fog. I know there's been a lot of debate over the years as to whether after a certain age, new brain cells can be developed. Can they? And if so, what is butyric acid's role in that, if any?
Well, first, we've heard that your body can't develop new cartilage, it can't repair your joints. And we, again, cut those out or drug until you have to get them cut out. And we're finding through just some very basic vitamin, mineral, and nutrient injections, oxygen injections, we can actually kickstart that healing process again. We've heard the same thing about our brains, that the brains won't necessarily regrow or won't remap or whatever. And yet there's this entire branch of neurology called neuroplasticity where they prove that that's the case, that our brain is ever-changing, that it can adapt, that it can continue to grow even after a certain time frame. So the question is, why won't it? And again, if you look foundationally, the information that put our brains together, our DNA, where did it go? It's still there. So again, why aren't we tapping into that? Why aren't we utilizing that? And certainly there's bigger brains than mine that will say this and that, and we're not having certain components. But the reality is we see with neuroplasticity the amazing things that the brain can do. And so if you fuel the brain, if you give the brain the things that it needs, be that the vitamins, minerals, building blocks, and so forth, if you protect the brain, so blocking the blood-brain barrier and making it so that the brain can heal and work in confinement, if you get rid of infections, if you relieve toxins, if you get those blocks, if you will, to the brain healing, then now we can start to explore some of the possibilities. Pulse electromagnetic fields, a lot of different components that we're looking at that will help stimulate brain growth and brain activity. But again, foundationally, you've got to create that link. You've got to have a healthy balance of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and neurotransmitters, which all starts in the digestive system.
Okay, doctor, we've talked a lot about different functions, different systems. Now, this may seem a little bit out there, and so if there's no connection, I get it. I've already been amazed at how many things are connected. But does butyric acid have any relationship to the health of the skin?
You know, when you first look at it, you think, gosh, how could those systems be connected? But interestingly enough, they are. Embryologically, so that's when you're forming inside of the womb, there's a group of cells that splinter off, and they eventually become your digestive system, your lungs, and your skin. And so those cells, as they branch off, will develop into each of those individual tissues. And if you think about it, it makes sense because they're all tissues that form barriers to us in the outside world. So we breathe air in, and it forms a barrier so it just doesn't run everywhere. Same thing with the things that we eat. And then our skin protects us in the day-to-day activities. Well, interestingly enough, because they share that common bond, a lot of the chemistry and chemicals and minerals and nutrients that affect one affect the other. We found that often by affecting the digestive system, we can cure rashes, things like psoriasis and a bunch of other things that patients think, oh, that's just a skin disease, and they'll take some pharmaceuticals to try and help with that, when actually the problem is back in the digestive system.
Wow, that's amazing. But when you put it that way, it really does make a lot of sense. It produces endothelial cells that protect the stomach lining, or that is the stomach lining that protects us.
Yes.
It protects and strengthens the blood-brain barrier. So I guess it makes sense that it would also protect and benefit the biggest barrier, the biggest organ on our body, which is our skin. All of those things seem to be connected, like you mentioned.
Very much connected.
And the immune system of the skin seems to be connected to the overall immune system, and so the same food, if you will, that would help one, so it would seem to help the other. This is just amazing stuff, Doctor. Dr. Earl, we're hearing a lot these days about something called epigenetics. Could you explain what epigenetics is and what role, if any, LINQ plays in epigenetics?
Absolutely. So we know that there are thousands of different genes in our DNA sequence. There's DNA that doesn't ever do anything within our DNA sequence. Let me give you a perfect example. We know that inside of our bodies, humans and guinea pigs, we don't make vitamin C. And yet, the DNA instructions in there, we just don't make it. All the rest of the mammals make their own vitamin C. Now, I'm going somewhere with this, which is that the reason is because that epigenetic, or we call it a methylation layer, you can kind of think of it like a blanket that's over your DNA. So we've all seen the double helix and how that comes around, and you've got this blanket that surrounds it. And then depending upon what genes your body wants to express, it will uncover that blanket, pull out the DNA, it will then make the protein, and away it goes and it does its job. So in a nutshell, that's what epigenetics is. It's that blanket, and it decides what genes get expressed and or not. And we know that there's certain toxins, infections, chronic different components of our diet that can actually alter those genes in the way that they're expressed. Interestingly enough, LINQ is one of those products that affects the epigenetics, the methylation blanket, if you will, that covers our DNA. And it has a definite effect, a major effect on our inflammatory system. So it upregulates our anti-inflammatory system and downregulates the pro-anti-inflammatory proteins. So in that way, it balances out our inflammation, if you will. Because it upregulates those anti-inflammatories, those are called antioxidants, and so helps us deal with oxidative stress.
So we are affecting our genes one way or the other with almost everything that we do.
Yes.
With our lifestyle choices, with our food choices, and that's doing it subconsciously, and so intentionally, it probably makes sense for us to take products that will positively affect those genes to accomplish all those benefits that you've talked about today.
That's a great way to put it.
Dr. Earl, as a longtime practicing physician and someone who's had a lot of experience in various types of medicine and treatments, I'm sure that many companies and individuals come to you with different products and different approaches, and some of which you probably dismiss out of hand, and others think might be kind of interesting. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what attracted you to LINQ.
Wow, great question. So the biggest things that I look at is it from a pure source, is it something that really benefits the body? And then we have to be able to not only, if it's a supplement, we have to get it past the stomach and its acid into the digestive system and then absorbed. So I love the fact that, again, butyric acid has so many different uses within the body, but a lot of different preparations won't necessarily get past the stomach, the acid that is there. So through fancy biochemistry and science, they've actually taken and wrapped this not only in a product or a process that gets it past the stomach, but gets it into the digestive system. Well, imagine if that wrapping, if you will, was also utilized and a prebiotic, if you will, food for the rest of your bacteria, your microbiome. Well, that's what they've done. And so you have a product that is really great on both spectrums as far as getting past the digestive system, useful to your body, and then it's used by the microbiome. Interestingly enough, some of those fibers, inulin and some of the other fibers that are with LINQ, are actually used by the digestive system to make additional butyric acid and other components that our body needs. So from a foundational level, from just a overall effectiveness, you're going to get better levels of butyric acid into your body using the LINQ product.
So, Doctor, we've talked about how butyric acid helps to increase metabolism, increase mitochondria, and things like that, and the endothelial cells, stomach lining. We've talked about neurotransmitters. I want to go back to the brain for a second. Everyone, especially as we get older, is concerned about staying sharp. We want the limitless pill that expands our mental capacity. We want to keep our memory. And we're worried about the diseases of aging, like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and things like that. What role can butyric acid play, and specifically LINQ, in helping keep our brains healthy and vibrant and strong?
Well, it's interesting. You talk about, the fact that we've talked about establishing a healthy gut, a healthy digestive system, a healthy microbiome. But really, understanding the connection between the brain and the digestive system is pivotal. And we often think of leaky gut just being in the digestive system, or irritable bowel syndrome just being in the digestive system. But we know through a lot of different research that patients can have different emotional triggers that set off a lot of these different components. And so the connection between the brain and the gut is absolutely paramount. When we talk about a second brain, or we talk about a first brain, really the question sometimes becomes which came first, and which is first, and which is most important. And to answer that question, which I'm asking myself and answering myself, is yes. The answer is both. And so we've got to take care of that digestive system. We've got to take care of that second brain so that our first brains, if you will, can function to their optimal ability. So things like protecting and closing the blood-brain barrier and taking care of that digestive system so more toxins and more aberrant information isn't leaking through and causing problems.
What if we've not had a good history of diet, or we've had other injuries, things that have caused some cell death in our brain? Is it possible to re-energize or develop new brain cells?
That's an interesting question, and we hear all the times that the brain doesn't change and the brain doesn't grow. Once it reached its max, here it is, and that's it. Yet there's an entire branch of neurology called neuroplasticity that shows that does happen, that it does work. And so, again, if you can give the brain an optimal environment where it can develop, grow, regenerate. We've actually shown through recent studies that you can get new neurons that form. You can get new connections that form. The brain can relearn. And so based on those facts, you want to empower the brain with mitochondria food, if you will. You want to make sure the membranes are healthy. That's butyric acid.
Wow. So going back, you said that endothelial cells love to eat butyric acid. It sounds like mitochondria love butyric acid. It sounds like neurons love butyric acid. Neurotransmitters like butyric acid. How can all of these very disparate functions and systems be so connected?
It comes down to it being a foundational treatment, something that's so profound, so basic, that all your cells need it, use it. In one way or another, they need it or use it. Sometimes it's for fuel. Sometimes it's to repair the membrane. Sometimes it's to do something completely different, stimulate DNA, those type of things. Whatever the source is, it's foundational in what it does, and all of our cells have become not only accustomed to it, but need it for optimal care. And that's a pivotal word here. The reality is making that link and connecting that link is really your opportunity to optimize your health, not just make it from day to day. And certainly it will help with that. But if you want to optimize your health, you've got to look at creating that link and making that connection.
You know, we would never say that LINQ, our LINQ, is the only thing that people need to do. But I know that in your practice of medicine, and you have branched far beyond traditional medicine into a lot of different areas of study. But if you were to just close our discussion today with a few words as to why are you so excited about the potential and the benefits that people can expect with LINQ?
Well, I think just being one of those foundational treatments, bacteria, if you will, that aren't even connected to our bodies find and use this and do it in a healthy manner. Butyric acid is one of those things that it changes the way we express our DNA, our inflammation. That helps with cardiovascular, it helps with neurofunction, it helps us get rid of chronic infections. It's just a foundational treatment. It's extremely exciting. And we combine that with nutrients and so forth that really draw that connection between the gut and the brain and the immune system, the brain and our hormones. I mean, this is all so interconnected. And when you talk about, a cell that's way off in the middle of our bodies and has nothing to do with the rest of these systems, what does it matter to them? It matters everything to them. Because I don't know of a cell in their body that doesn't respond to hormones, that doesn't respond to some type of neurological input, that absolutely is under the influence of our immune system. So foundational, absolutely fundamental care that makes a big impact on every cell in our body.
I really appreciate you taking the time with us today, and it's so great to know that we don't all have to have medical degrees, but there are things that we can do to take control of our own health. And I think LINQ is one of those examples of things that we can do the research, find out more about it, and then experience the benefits in our own lives.
And if I may, out there in consumer land, if you will, the reality is you have to be responsible for your own care. Too often in Western medicine, patients come in and they want us to just take care of them. And here I am, I'm sick, take care of me. We've got to jump in. We've got to have that mindset that we really need to do everything we can to create health ourselves. And part of that is looking and educating yourself and finding out those fundamental and just really absolutely amazing treatments that make a true difference.
Well, that's great. Well, I said that would be the end of our discussion, but I think I'd be remiss on my behalf and the behalf of many of those who are part of the Activz corporate team and the people who love them if I didn't ask this question.
Okay.
Is this going to help our hair grow back?
Wow. Well, no.
All right. Thank you, man.